chosen ones. Let's set the tone right from the gate, because this one hits deep. The worst kind of fire is the one someone lights, thinking they'll never feel the heat themselves. But hear this clearly. The flames they thought would consume you have circled back. And now, it's their foundation that's crumbling. Your ex didn't simply walk away. They torched something sacred and assumed karma was asleep. But spiritual laws never sleep. And now, the smoke they laughed at is choking everything they touch. Thank you to every single one of you who has donated through Super Thanks. Your love, your generosity, and your spirit are what keep this movement going. You're not just supporters, you're spiritual warriors standing beside us. Whether you've given once or simply watched in silence, we are beyond grateful. Just knowing this message resonates in your soul fuels everything we create. Now let's activate this light and push it even further. Drop a 999 in the comments right now if you're feeling this truth in your spirit. That number signals divine closure and new beginnings, and your comment helps this fire reach more chosen ones who need the reminder. This isn't just content. It's a calling. It's a warning. And it's a revelation for anyone who's ever been left standing in the ashes, only to rise higher than the ones who lit the match. So take a deep breath. Get still, because what you're about to hear isn't just vindication, it's confirmation. And if they thought your silence was weakness, wait until they hear the thunder that follows your healing. God's chosen ones. Your ex is under investigation, and regret is destroying them. They didn't just walk away from you, they trespassed against something sacred. This wasn't just a case of heartbreak or a failed relationship. This was a spiritual violation. You weren't just some person in their life, you were a divine appointment. God placed you in their path not as a toy, not as a temporary thrill, but as a reflection of light they weren't ready to honor. And yet, they treated your soul like a disposable item at a discount auction. Can you feel now, in your bones, how valuable your presence truly was? They saw your glow. Oh yes, they saw it. That rare energy, that pull they couldn't explain. It tugged at their spirit, but instead of honoring it, they gambled with it, as if the divine didn't come with consequences, as if your sacred heart wasn't guarded by heaven's court, but chosen one. The universe always keeps score, and now the tab is due. A breakup can be human. People outgrow each other. Love evolves. But what they did was calculated. Behind the curtain, it was warfare covert, emotional sabotage. When they left, they didn't just leave, they aligned with your enemies. Isn't it something how people reveal their true loyalty in moments of distance? They linked arms with the very people who despised your light. They shared your secrets with mockers. They laughed at your growth as if your healing was a punchline. Have you ever wondered why someone would hate your light so much? Unless they were drowning in darkness, they tried to turn others against you, hoping chaos would drown out your calling. But chosen one, light cannot be replaced with confusion. It only exposes it. Consider this. What kind of person trades divinely ordained love for shallow attention? History has seen it before. Think of Samson and Delilah. She manipulated his strength, and in doing so, triggered her own downfall. Judges 16:15-21. Or Judas, who walked beside the Son of God, only to betray him for silver, never realizing the eternal regret that would follow. Matthew 26:14-16. Your ex played a dangerous game. They thought God wouldn't notice. They thought karma was delayed, but karma is patient. It watches in silence. It doesn't sleep, it records. And now, the consequences are here. They're restless, on edge, can't sit still. The same peace they laughed at you for chasing. They can't find it now. Every room they walk into feels cold. Every conversation feels off. Why? Because your absence is louder than your presence ever was. They're being haunted, not by ghosts, but by the echo of what they threw away. Tell me, chosen one, do you think they expected the silence to scream like this? Every blessing that would have flowed through your union has now dried up. That's not just coincidence, it's divine redirection. Even celebrities have tasted this. Think of singer Adele. Her heartbreak didn't end her. It launched her into artistic greatness, while the ones who left could only watch her rise. Or consider Steve Harvey, who was homeless at one point after a divorce, but now speaks globally about divine restoration. Or Ciara, who left toxicity behind and walked into alignment, then married a man who saw her worth. These aren't just success stories. They're modern parables. What if yours is next? Isaiah 54:17 reminds us, "No weapon formed against you shall prosper." It doesn't say the weapons won't form, it says they won't work. Your ex's betrayal was a weapon, but it's backfiring now. Proverbs 26:27 says, "Whoever digs a pit will fall into it. If someone rolls a stone, it will roll back on them." That's exactly what's happening. Psalm 34:18 speaks of you. The Lord is close to the broken-hearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. Your crushing season was sacred. You weren't being buried, you were being planted. So now the question is this: when you see them unravel, when the regret starts devouring them from the inside, will you still let it hurt you? Or will you understand that their chaos is confirmation of your anointing? Romans 12:19 says, "Do not take revenge, my dear friends, but leave room for God's wrath." You don't have to clap back. Just keep glowing. Keep rising. You don't need to watch karma handle it, but just know it absolutely is. And it's not stopping anytime soon. You are the reminder they can't escape, the standard they couldn't meet, the door they closed on themselves. This is more than justice. This is divine storytelling, and you, chosen one, are the proof that some exits were God's way of making room for the upgrade. Have you ever realized that your glow-up was always going to be there haunting? Because it is, and it's only just beginning, chosen one. Let's be clear, your presence was never average, your spirit was never small, and your love was never something to play with. You weren't just someone to love, you were their divine rescue, a lifeline from heaven that came wrapped in human form. You were the intercession they didn't even realize they were receiving, and yet they severed that lifeline like it was nothing. Can you see now why they're gasping in the aftermath? Choking on the silence that used to be filled with your prayers, your peace, your presence. They knew deep down, in the places they don't talk about, that they weren't ready for you. Not spiritually, not emotionally. You came with a frequency too rare, too healing, too honest. You were a mirror, reflecting their potential, but also exposing their wounds. And instead of rising to meet you at your level, they tried to pull you down to theirs. Why do some people choose sabotage over surrendering to growth? Why do they fear the very love that could heal them? When dragging you down didn't work, they ran to others, letting friends, family, and online spectators carry the lies they couldn't say out loud. And they watched, entertained, while your name got twisted in whispers. Tell me, chosen one, have you ever been punished for being someone's blessing? But heaven hears what man mocks. Spiritual crimes don't go unnoticed. They echo across realms. What they did wasn't just relational damage, it was a spiritual betrayal. That kind of violation sends shockwaves into the spiritual atmosphere, and now, those waves are returning to them. They hear your voice in their sleep. They see your face on strangers in crowds. They scroll through social media and stumble upon messages that sound like the things you used to say. They find bits of your energy in people who aren't even remotely like you, and they're haunted by the realization that you were never ordinary. Doesn't it sting? Chosen one. To be thrown away like garbage and then worshipped like a memory. Let's look at what happened to those who made similar mistakes. Whitney Houston's ex-husband, Bobby Brown, has spoken openly about how he mishandled love and lost the peace that came with it. Or consider Princess Diana, cast aside by a royal system, only to become a global symbol of compassion long after her departure. Even actor Brendan Fraser was once shunned by the industry after revealing personal trauma. Yet his rise again became a symbol of divine restoration. These stories remind us what the world throws away, God exalts. They thought you were replaceable, so they went searching. New faces, new voices, new vibes. But every upgrade feels empty now. They didn't just lose a relationship, they lost spiritual insurance. Your presence came with protection. Your prayers covered them when they didn't even know danger was near. Your discernment kept them from spiritual traps. Now, that shield is gone. Can they even recognize how dark it's become since you left? Isaiah 41:10 says, "Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God." You were God's hand extended to them, and they slapped it away. Psalm 91:11 declares, "For he will command his angels concerning you, to guard you in all your ways." That divine protection surrounded you, and by being with you, it extended to them. But when they disrespected the source, they forfeited the covering. Now, every day feels cursed. Their new chapter is plagued with spiritual static. They've traded the presence of a chosen one for shallow distractions. Tell me, how does one replace divine favor with empty validation? Romans 11:29 reminds us, "For God's gifts and his call are irrevocable." Your anointing didn't leave just because they rejected it. In fact, their betrayal only activated it further. And now, they're reaping the harvest of their decision. Galatians 6:7 warns, "Do not be deceived. God is not mocked. A man reaps what he sows. What they sowed in cruelty, they're harvesting in torment. And it's only getting louder. You were never just a partner. You were a prophetic appointment, a sacred encounter, a vessel of healing and discernment. Their loss is not just romantic, it's cosmic. They violated alignment. And when someone spits on grace, it doesn't vanish, it transforms. It becomes the lesson that chases them, the echo that never dies. Have you ever seen someone live in the shadow of the love they mistreated? Even author Elizabeth Gilbert, who wrote Eat, Pray, Love, speaks of how a failed relationship became the divine catalyst for her transformation. Or look at Chadwick Boseman, who carried purpose so heavy it outlived him, and some never saw it until it was gone. Your story is no different. Your glow wasn't fully understood until it was absent. But now, that ache they feel, that void they can't name, it's your departure, and it's not going away. Your ex didn't just walk away from a relationship, they violated something divine. This wasn't a casual goodbye or a mutual parting of ways. They crossed a sacred line, one that most people don't even recognize until it's too late. They didn't just exit your life, they abandoned a spiritual contract, one they were never truly worthy of, but were still blessed to receive. When the Most High assigns someone to your journey, someone chosen, anointed, carrying divine power, purpose, and supernatural protection, betrayal doesn't just end in heartbreak. It calls down a response from heaven itself. Have you ever wondered why some breakups feel like more than just emotional pain? Why they shake your very soul? Chosen one. Your presence in their life was a divine shift. You were never just a stop along the way. You were the upgrade. You were the moment their life was supposed to ascend. But instead of cherishing that, they treated you like a pit stop, like a gas station on their road trip to self-destruction. Have you ever seen someone get handed gold and toss it aside for gravel? That's what they did. Not because you lacked value, but because they couldn't comprehend it. And now they're wandering, confused, wondering why every opportunity slips through their fingers, why relationships feel cursed, why, no matter how hard they try, nothing aligns anymore. They broke a covenant, not just a connection. There's a massive difference. When someone dates or walks beside a chosen soul, they unknowingly step into a spiritual agreement, whether they acknowledge it or not. The moment they touched your life, they became part of something bigger. That relationship came with covering, it came with favor, protection, elevation, and yes, it also came with consequences when betrayed. Psalm 105:15 says, "Do not touch my anointed ones, do my prophets no harm." What happens when someone violates that warning? They awaken a judgment they cannot outrun. Look around, now they're living in the backlash. Doors that once flew open now slam shut. Relationships that once seemed promising dissolve in confusion. Money doesn't stretch. Peace doesn't stay. And sleep is disturbed by guilt they don't even know how to name. Proverbs 1:31 They will eat the fruit of their ways and be filled with the fruit of their schemes. This is exactly what's happening. They are being fed by their own disobedience. Think of real-life stories. When Halle Berry's former partners tried to play with her value, many saw their own careers and public favor decline, while hers evolved. Or look at Meghan Markle after being slandered. She stepped into new light, while those who misjudged her were left in PR chaos. NBA star Dwyane Wade openly admitted how he nearly lost Gabrielle Union due to his own missteps, but repented and fought to rebuild what he broke. The truth is, divine connections come with divine requirements. When violated, they don't just leave emotional holes, they leave spiritual consequences. When you entered their life, things began to change, didn't they? Suddenly, doors opened for them. Their creativity sparked, ideas flowed. Peace settled in rooms that were once full of chaos. That wasn't random, that was your presence. Your spiritual authority was activating blessings in their environment. Isaiah 60:1 tells you, "Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord rises upon you." You were that glory in their life, the light that exposed disorder and called forth clarity. The calm they experienced, that was your discernment. The order they claimed as their own, that was your structure. The mental breakthroughs, the career wins, the inner peace, all ripples from your alignment with God. Ephesians 5:8 reminds us, "For you were once darkness, but now you are light in the Lord." Live as children of light. You brought that light into their world, and they didn't know what to do with it. Isn't it tragic how some people are so used to chaos that peace feels threatening, and now they're in the dark again, searching, longing, chasing empty substitutes that don't carry your essence? Because what you gave wasn't just love, It was spiritual order. It was sacred protection. And they forfeited all of it. Galatians says, "Nueve encourages you. Let us not become weary in doing good. For at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up." Just because they mishandled you doesn't mean you were wrong for showing up. You were the blessing. And the moment they betrayed that, the blessings left with you. Even public figures have admitted this truth. Think of Will Smith's emotional confessions about how his personal failures almost cost him the deepest love of his life. Or Justin Bieber, who admitted that without faith and realignment, he nearly sabotaged everything sacred in his world. These aren't just celebrity gossip headlines, they're testimonies, and so is yours. They called you too emotional, as if your sensitivity wasn't a divine radar. They mocked your seriousness, not realizing it was the weight of your spiritual depth. They labeled your love intense, because shallow hearts can't comprehend oceans. Chosen one. They thought they could ghost you, twist truths, laugh with your enemies, and vanish into the crowd without consequence. But what they failed to understand is this: when someone betrays a soul backed by the universe, by God Himself, they don't just lose love. They lose access to protection, to grace, to the quiet blessings that followed them, simply because you were in their life. Now, look at them, confused, spiritually exhausted, suspicious of every good thing, drained of peace, haunted by the very voice they tried to forget. The same hand that lifted them is no longer covering them. The invisible shield that kept their enemies at bay, it's gone. Why? Because it was your favor, not theirs, that was moving mountains behind the scenes. And when they betrayed you, they forfeited the covering that came with you. Isaiah 30:1 speaks directly to this. "Woe to the rebellious children, declares the Lord, who carry out plans that are not mine, adding sin to sin." They stepped outside of divine order and thought there would be no consequence. Have you noticed their glow-up looks hollow now? Maybe they're posting big smiles, filters and captions full of self-love, mantras, but behind that digital mask is a restless mind, haunted by echoes. They know exactly what they gave up, and they know they can't recreate it. How do you copy the irreplaceable? There is no substitute for a chosen one. Souls like yours don't just show up, they're assigned. And once a divine assignment is dishonored, the next one doesn't come. Even in entertainment, you see this truth echo. Think of rapper Common, who has spoken about deep regrets in relationships that were mishandled due to emotional immaturity. Or actor Michael B. Jordan, whose infamous red carpet moment facing an old classmate turned media person went viral, and who used it to reclaim dignity and show that those overlooked often rise higher. These aren't coincidences. They're patterns. When you mishandle divine connections, you walk into drought, some may ask. But isn't it just a breakup? Can't people leave if they're unhappy? Absolutely. No one is held hostage in love. God gives us the free will to walk away. But walking away in honesty and respect is one thing. Walking away while slandering, sabotaging, and spiritually violating someone is another. What your ex did wasn't a quiet departure, it was a soul-level offense. Instead of reaching for healing, they reached for gossip. Instead of confronting their own weakness, they embraced tempters and flatterers. Instead of growing up, they spiraled downward. And the most dangerous part, they partnered with your spiritual enemies, those who didn't just dislike you, but who actively worked to dim your light. Ephésiens 6:12 reminds us, "For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. This wasn't just emotional warfare, it was spiritual betrayal. And now they're suffering the fallout. Not because you cursed them, but because they disconnected from the one person whose prayers were holding their life together. Romans 8:31 says, "If God is for us, who can be against us?" But when someone positions themselves against someone God is for, they quickly find themselves at war with heaven. And haven't we seen this before? Consider Selena Gomez, who faced betrayal, public criticism, and emotional abuse, but emerged as a testimony of resilience and divine favor. Meanwhile, those who contributed to her pain found themselves lost in public backlash or emotional chaos. Or look at Terry Crews, who fought back from marital damage, addiction, and spiritual disconnection through accountability and prayer. Redemption is possible, but only for those who repent. Has your ex even paused to truly face the depth of what they did? Or are they still smiling online while their spirit deteriorates in silence? Their biggest mistake wasn't in what they said, it was in what they touched. They put their hands on something sacred. They took your heart, your prayers, your presence, and treated it like an option. And now those same hands can't seem to hold on to anything. Jobs slip away. Friendships crumble. Relationships feel forced. Joy never stays. Why? Because grace exited with you. 1 Chronicles 16:22 declares, "Do not touch my anointed ones, do my prophets no harm." They touched anointed ground without fear, and now they walk in dry places without peace. And you are not bitter, you're wiser. You're not broken, you're reborn. The very depth they mocked is the same depth that's now elevating you. Your emotions were never weakness, they were discernment. Your seriousness was never too much, it was purpose. Your love wasn't too intense, it was healing. But only those who are healed can handle healing. The rest will run and live haunted by the miracle they mistreated. Some people recognized who you were from the beginning. They didn't just sense you were different, they knew it. They felt it in your presence, saw it in your eyes, heard it in your voice. You weren't like the others. Your love came with healing. Your words carried power. Your energy wasn't chaotic, it was ordered, sacred. And yet, even with all this knowing, they made a deadly assumption that your grace meant you'd always stay. They mistook your patience for permission, your compassion for weakness, your consistency for complacency. They thought you'd keep forgiving them, no matter how far they pushed. That you'd return no matter how many times they slammed the door. They assumed you'd forever dim your brilliance just to let their shadows feel taller. But when you finally cut the cord, when your silence replaced your presence, that's when the war began. Chosen one, you were never just some girl, never just some guy. You were a mirror forged in heaven. You reflected not just who they were, but who they could have been. And when you left, when that mirror was removed, they had no choice but to face the raw, unfiltered version of themselves, the one you had tried so hard to elevate. That's why it hurts so much for them now. They're not just mourning love, they're mourning potential. The potential to become more, to rise, to evolve, all of which was tied to your presence in their life. That grief, it's not just about missing you, it's about knowing they fumbled their chance to transform. Have you ever wondered why their new relationships fall apart so quickly? Why their smiles seem fake online? Why every connection they chase feels fragile, temporary, or transactional? It's not just your intuition speaking, it's the truth. You weren't just a chapter, you were the turning point in their entire story. The universe, God Himself, reminds them daily of what they lost, and no matter how many followers they gain, how many new faces they entertain, nothing fills the void your spirit left behind, and still whispers come. Your standards were too high. They say, you expected too much. But here's the truth. Chosen one, don't feel guilty. Don't carry the weight of their regret. You weren't asking for too much. You were asking someone broken to rise to the level they prayed for. Because you were the very answer to a prayer they once made when they were on their knees in silence. They asked for peace, for love, for growth, and then rejected it when it arrived, wrapped in accountability, truth, and intensity. That wasn't your failure. That was their fear. Scripture says in Proverbs 10:22, "The blessing of the Lord brings wealth, without painful toil for it." You were that effortless favor, a blessing that elevated everything it touched. But blessings require stewardship. And they didn't steward you. They mishandled you. Every lie they told. Every moment they laughed behind your back. Every eye roll while you cried. Every secret they told others at your expense. The universe took notes. God watched every single betrayal. And now, that same divine force is pulling you away, not as punishment for them, but as protection for you. Here's what they never predicted. They thought leaving you would destroy you. They were so convinced you'd spiral, break down, lose yourself. But instead, you woke up. You didn't crumble, you evolved. You didn't beg, you built. You didn't seek revenge, you sought clarity. Their betrayal didn't kill your purpose. It activated it. What they meant for harm, God used for upgrade. Romans vent wheat tells us. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him. They were the trigger, but you were the transformation. Look around now. You're stronger, wiser, sharper, more spiritually alert than ever before. Their chaos couldn't follow you into this new chapter. And while they scroll, while they lurk on your page with regret tightening around their chest, understand this: they didn't just lose a lover. They lost divine partnership. They fumbled the rarest soul they'll ever meet, and now that memory is replaying like a silent storm in their mind. Think of real-life parallels. Kiara walked away from years of dysfunction and now lives in peace with a husband who honors her. Viola Davis once opened up about walking away from someone who couldn't handle her worth, only to find healing and elevation. Even Tyler Perry has spoken about the pain of being misunderstood, only to realize later that rejection was redirection. What if your pain, too, was a portal? Your ex didn't just fall out of love. They fell out of alignment. They stepped away from their own elevation. The moment they mishandled you, they walked away from divine protection, divine order, and divine favor. And that shift, it was instant. Their peace vanished. Opportunities dried up. Old connections turned cold. Energy around them changed. Psalm 1 says declares, "For the Lord watches over the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked leads to destruction." They are walking proof. Their tragedy wasn't in leaving you. The real loss was leaving their rising path. The moment they decided ego was more comfortable than growth, they made a choice to sabotage their own future. They didn't just leave a relationship, they exited destiny. And now, every door that opens is followed by unrest. Every victory feels tainted. Every smile is chased by silence. Because peace doesn't dwell where grace has been abused. Ecclesiastes 3:1 says, "To everything there is a season, and a time for every matter under heaven." Your season with them ended not because of your failure, But because of their failure to evolve, the shift wasn't gradual. It was cosmic, a divine severance. And now they're left wandering, trying to recreate what was never meant to be manufactured. You were a divine original, not a template. Walking beside a chosen one isn't like any other relationship. It's a divine partnership, a spiritual alliance that carries weight in the unseen realms. When someone is graced to walk beside you, they're not just sharing affection or moments, they're sharing your authority, your purpose, and the supernatural protection that surrounds your life. So when they betray that connection, they don't just lose a lover, they lose alignment. That's why everything starts to go sideways. That's why the thrill fades. The joy short-circuits, and life starts to feel eerily hollow. No matter how many distractions they chase. Chosen one. Have you ever watched someone act like they're winning, while their spirit silently crumbles behind the scenes? They thought a new relationship would heal them, thought the parties, the praise, the endless options would patch the hole you left behind. But they underestimated the depth of your impact. There is no replacement for a divinely assigned soul. No hype can replicate healing. No casual fling can replace covenant. They moved on, or so they thought, but now they can't sit still. Their soul is fidgeting in places that used to feel peaceful. You can feel it sometimes, can't you? That strange tug in your spirit, that knowing, because while they're acting fine in public, their peace is fractured in private. Every grin they post has a crack. Every laugh carries a shadow. They're not haunted by you, they're haunted by what they lost in you. Regret doesn't whisper. It screams when peace is gone. Suddenly, they talk about you more now than they did when they had you. Why? Because their soul is screaming for the presence it once dismissed. They thought walking away meant freedom. But what do you call freedom when it comes wrapped in guilt and spiritual confusion? What do you call elevation when you're surrounded by people who don't nourish your growth, don't challenge your spirit, and certainly don't shine like the one you discarded? They didn't just downgrade in love, they downgraded in spirit. You were medicine, slow healing, deep-rooted, transformational. But médecine requiert patience. They chose ego instead. They picked temptation over truth, shallow excitement over spiritual depth. And now, life feels grey. Even the things they used to chase the attention, the validation, the status feel flat. Why? Because those things only glitter when you have peace, and the peace left when you did. Philippians 8. Sept reminds us, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Your presence carried that peace, not just emotional calm, but supernatural order. When they betrayed you, they didn't just break your heart, they fractured their own alignment with that peace. And now, they look lit up on the outside, but drained on the inside. You've seen it, haven't you? That spark is missing. That internal shine is gone. This isn't just heartbreak. This is cosmic payback. Because you can't betray someone sent to lift you and expect your life to stay lifted. You were their mirror, their favor, their intercessor, their covering. While you were with them, you challenged them to be better. You urged them to heal. You pushed them to think deeper, live purer, aim higher. But that kind of light terrifies people who still want to hide in the dark. They hated your spotlight, not because it was harsh, but because it exposed parts of them they weren't ready to face. Have you ever realized that some people would rather lose love than face themselves? Now they're not just haunted by your memory, they're chased by what-ifs, by the version of themselves they could have become if they had stayed and grown with you. Your voice still lingers in the quiet, your laughter, your wisdom. The way you saw through their lies with love, it follows them. Proverbs 26, 27 warns. Whoever digs a pit will fall into it. If someone rolls a stone, it will roll back on them. They plotted against your peace. Now they're living in the pit they dug. Even pride can't mute the spirit. Their ego may block confession. But deep down, they know they lost something sacred, something they can't replicate, replace, or recreate. You left a mark too deep to scrub away, and the most painful truth, they could have built with you, healed with you, elevated with you, but instead, they chose betrayal. And the universe never rewards betrayal with breakthrough. Think of real-life stories. Actor Josh Hartnett once stepped back from the spotlight, only to later admit he passed on opportunities that could have changed his trajectory. Or think of Lauryn Hill, who poured her soul into love and purpose, and when misunderstood, retreated, leaving behind echoes of what could have been. Or consider even Michelle Obama's early relationship with Barack. Had either of them failed to protect their bond, history itself would have changed. Divine partnerships aren't just about chemistry. They carry destiny. Hebrews 10:26 reminds us, if we deliberately keep on sinning after we have received the knowledge of the truth, no sacrifice for sins is left. Your ex knew. They weren't oblivious. They were irresponsible with the sacred. They held something holy in their hands and mocked it. And now, those same hands can't hold on to anything lasting. Every attempt at progress is met with friction. Every step forward feels like a trip into the past. That's not just nostalgia. That's spiritual disconnection. That's the price of stepping out of divine alignment. Let them watch. Let them pretend. Let them talk. Behind the noise is a soul that knows they fumbled, a one-of-a-kind connection, and it won't pass them by again. Isaías 5:20 declares, woe to those who call evil good and good evil. That's what they did, called your wisdom too much, your love too clingy, your light too blinding, and now they sit in the darkness they chose, wondering why it feels colder than before. So stand tall. Chosen one, don't lower your light. Don't mourn what couldn't honor you. Their exit was not your rejection, it was their redirection, away from favor. Because when someone exits alignment with a chosen one, they don't just lose a relationship, they lose a divine portal and spend the rest of their journey trying to find the door again. And that door, it's locked. Because grace doesn't beg to be held. It moves on glowing, elevated, and protected. Just like you, they were handed the keys to a kingdom, not just any kingdom, but your kingdom, a place sacred, rich with wisdom, glowing with favor, guarded by your light and softened by your love. And instead of treasuring the map you laid out with your heart, they tossed it into the fire like it was nothing. That's the real heartbreak, isn't it? Not just the betrayal itself, but watching someone have front row access to the most delicate parts of your soul, only for them to stumble in drunk on their own ego, careless in their decisions, and spiritually half asleep. You didn't hide who you were. You didn't play games. You offered yourself raw, unfiltered, and divine. And what did they do with that sacred offering? They shattered it, not because they couldn't see its value, but because their pride screamed louder than their discernment. Let's be brutally honest. This wasn't someone who didn't know better. They weren't naive. No, they had full access. You gave them spiritual clearance. They saw you in your truth, witnessed your loyalty show up on time, day after day. They heard your voice shake when you shared your fears, They saw how your light never dimmed, even in your lowest hours. And still, they chose recklessness over reverence. Instead of shielding your soul, they mishandled it. Instead of seeing your devotion as a blessing, they viewed it as a leash. Instead of rising with you, they tried to reduce you. Why? Because loving you required maturity, and they weren't ready for that kind of sacred intimacy. Now, they can't escape you. You're in their mind, in their memory, in every pause between sentences, in every sigh. At 2 a.m., they feel you in the silence. You linger like a restless ghost, not because you haunt them intentionally, but because your absence is louder than their entire present. Every new person they meet gets compared to you, to your patience, your insight, your glow, but no one measures up, because no one was sent the way you were. You weren't just another chapter in their story. You were a full-blown spiritual event, a collision with destiny, and they flunked the test. See, many people assume the chosen one is always the one who's supposed to learn the lesson, but that's not always true. Sometimes, you are the lesson. Sometimes, the chosen one is the evidence the mirror held up to someone to reveal whether they're truly ready for the thing they claim they're praying for. You were that wish granted, that divine appointment, that prophetic answer, and what did they do? They panicked. They self-sabotaged. They attacked the gift because it reminded them they weren't ready to evolve. Instead of reaching for your hand in gratitude, they turned their back in fear. Imagine someone being handed the crown jewels, only to use them as a paperweight for their coffee mug. That's what they did to you. They treated access as entitlement. They took your kindness as control. They saw your emotional presence and assumed you'd never walk. But chosen ones don't beg to be seen. We don't argue with confusion. We leave, quietly, and we let the silence after our exit preach sermons louder than any confrontation ever could. History is littered with these stories. Look at Joseph, betrayed by his own brothers, thrown into a pit by people too blinded by jealousy to recognize the leader among them. Genesis 37-23-28. Think of Frida Kahlo, whose love for Diego Rivera clashed with his inability to handle her pain, her fire, her vivid truth. Malcolm X, a man of vision and strength, was assassinated by people who once stood beside him. Vincent van Gogh painted brilliance into the world while being dismissed and mocked by everyone around him. Harriet Tubman faced resistance even from the people she risked everything to save, over and over again. The chosen are betrayed not by enemies, but by those too small to grasp the size of their purpose. This isn't just emotional betrayal, it's cosmic offense. To mishandle a chosen one is to disrupt divine alignment. It's like walking into a temple and knocking over sacred artifacts, then expecting blessings to continue flowing. That's why life starts spiraling after you're gone. That's why their peace fragments, their energy dries up, their joy feels staged, because the moment they betrayed you, the spiritual equilibrium was shattered, and now the universe is balancing the scales. And no, this isn't about revenge. It's about alignment, what they broke. They now have to live without where they once had your prayers, your protection, your vision. Now they have static noise, confusion, restlessness. They tried to bury the seed that was meant to elevate them. And now all they're harvesting are weeds of regret. John 15:5 says, "Apart from me, you can do nothing. You carried Christ's light. You carried divine favor. You were the vessel God used to anchor them in seasons they didn't even realize were battles. Now that you're gone, they're exposed. And that new love they flaunt, that fresh start, That smile in the selfies, it all cracks beneath the surface. Because they can't forget what they mishandled. You weren't a phase. You were the turning point. Think of how many public figures have shared their stories of mishandling blessings. Rapper Big Sean once said he didn't know how to love right until he lost someone who taught him how. Actor Robert Downey Jr. spoke openly about burning bridges during his battles with addiction and learning the hard way that some doors don't reopen. Even Princess Diana, whose light and compassion were misunderstood by the very institution that should have protected her, became a global symbol of grace after being mistreated. Now your ex is living that pattern on the outside. They may appear fine, even thriving, but spiritually, they're suffocating. They traded gold for gravel, purpose for popularity, truth for temporary thrills. And now every consequence carries their name. Galatians 6:7 tells us, "Do not be deceived. God is not mocked. A man reaps what he sows. What they sowed in disrespect, they now harvest in silence." You were the blueprint, the key, the mirror, and now, while you build the life they could have built with you, they're left pressing their face against the glass, watching, regretting, aching for another chance they'll never get. The doors they walk through now echo with what could have been. Their prayers are different now, but their alignment is broken. Because chosen ones don't cycle back. Once our assignment is complete, we don't re-enter the test. We graduate, and you've leveled up. You've healed deeper. You've realigned with your purpose. You've realized that what they called too much was actually perfect timing for someone else. Psalm 118:22 says, "The stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone." That's you. Rejected not because you were weak, but because you were ahead of your time. And now, your presence is the very thing they'll spend a lifetime trying to duplicate and never succeed. When someone mishandles a divine blessing, the universe doesn't respond with silence, it responds with balance. Make no mistake. Chosen one, the spiritual realm does not ignore injustice. Especially not when someone mistreats a soul it ordained to heal, uplift, and cover. What they held in their hands wasn't just a good person, it wasn't just affection, support, or companionship. It was what others cry for, what generations long for, what people spend lifetimes praying for, and they spat on it, not because it lacked brilliance, but because pride deceived them. Pride told them that something sacred loses value once it becomes theirs. But pride always comes before the fall. And now, a slow, creeping spiritual famine has begun. And no ego, no party, no rebound can keep the drought from setting in. They didn't walk away from someone who was nice. They walked away from an assignment, a divine one. You were the one sent to help stabilize their chaos, to love them into growth, to pray silently for their protection without asking for applause. You were their anchor, the calm hand in every storm, the quiet intercessor they never heard, but always benefited from. You absorbed hits they never saw coming. You extended grace they never earned. And yet, they mistook your gentleness for weakness. They saw your loyalty and assumed it came from low standards. They took your forgiveness and labeled it foolish. Why do people confuse softness with stupidity? Because they've never had to earn the kind of love that requires maturity to keep. They saw your shine. Oh yes. They noticed. But they thought it came easy. They assumed your light was effortless because you made love look so natural. But they never asked what it cost you to be this strong, this steady, this faithful. They never inquired about the nights you cried yourself into silence, The betrayals that forced you to build boundaries brick by brick. The childhood pain that shaped your wisdom. The suffering that matured your spirit. Your strength wasn't loud, so they thought it was free. Your healing was internal, so they thought it wasn't real. Comfort bred carelessness, and that carelessness fermented into cruelty. They kept pushing, assuming you'd never walk. They thought you needed them, thought you were too kind to leave. But chosen ones don't beg for seats at tables. They were born to build. You were never supposed to stay where you were devalued. So, you moved on, not with noise, but with grace. And the curse? It started quietly. Subtle delays, unexplained irritations, inner unrest. But now, it's loud. It's visceral. That job they once bragged about feels like a cage. The casual flings they once flaunted, spiritually void. The new upgrade they showed off on Instagram, all packaging, no soul. The more they chase sparkle, the more they're reminded of the light they threw away. And here you are rising, quietly, consistently. Their downfall isn't coming from outside sabotage, it's coming from the inside. Every scroll through their feed, every old photo, every random conversation where someone casually asks, "Hey, whatever happened to them?" It pierces them. That ache in their chest isn't nostalgia, it's consequence. That restlessness isn't just anxiety, it's divine correction. That spiritual static, it's the cost of mocking what God sent to bless them. Galatians 6-7 speaks to this clearly. Do not be deceived, God is not mocked. Whatever a man sows, that he will also reap. They sowed recklessness into your peace. They sowed dishonor into sacred space. And now, they're reaping the silence, the loneliness, the frustration of walking without the covering you once provided. This pattern is ancient. Galileo was ridiculed for speaking truth before anyone else was ready to hear it. Thinkers, prophets, artists, leaders all carried gifts too heavy for the shallow-hearted to understand. Frida Kahlo, whose suffering was dismissed while her brilliance was romanticized. Vincent van Gogh, ignored while alive, worshipped after death. Jesus himself misunderstood, betrayed, crucified by the very ones he came to save. You are in divine company. Betrayal is often the price of being sacred. And here's the deeper truth. They didn't just lose you. They lost favor. They lost peace. They lost divine rhythm. That's what happens when someone curses the gift God sent to bless their life. It's not just heartbreak, it's cosmic imbalance. Proverbs 1:31. They will eat the fruit of their ways and be filled with the fruit of their schemes. And that's exactly what's happening now. Their world is full of noise, loud rooms, forced laughter, recycled connections, but none of it fills the void. Why? Because you weren't just love, you were a lifeline. Your love had aim, your presence had purpose. You loved with depth, stood with force, forgave with grace, and protected with wisdom. They didn't just reject love, they rejected their own rescue. And now, they walk through a downfall of their own design. Even the enemy knows when a chosen one walks away. Even hell feels the vacuum. That's how powerful your role was in their life. Psalm 105:15 says, "Do not touch my anointed ones, do my prophets no harm." That includes you, chosen one. You were covered while covering them, when they touched your peace with chaos, your loyalty with deception, your prayers with mockery. They didn't just hurt you, they provoked heaven. They thought the storm wouldn't come, but they forgot the spiritual realm doesn't rush. It waits, it watches, And when correction comes, it's not loud, it's precise. That dry spell in their finances, the stagnation in their progress, the anxiety they can't name, all symptoms of walking away from divine alignment. They touched the ark, thinking it was a toy, and now they can't stop the shaking. Your elevation, on the other hand, is proof of divine reversal. Isaiah 160 promises. Instead of your shame, you shall receive a double portion. And instead of disgrace, you will rejoice in your inheritance. You are stepping into your double. What they misused is now being multiplied for you. You were the seed. They were the soil. But not every soil is good ground. And when good seed falls on rocky places, God removes it and replants it in fertile land. Even celebrities have lived this. Oprah was fired from her early job for being too emotional, only to become a media powerhouse. Tyler Perry slept in his car while being rejected. Now his name sits on studios. Jennifer Hudson was eliminated from American Idol before she ever won an Oscar. What others toss away, heaven often crowns. You, too, will be crowned. So what now? Let them watch. Let them scroll. Let them wonder how peace can glow so loudly in your life when they thought their absence would destroy you. Let them sit in their self-made storm while you rise above it. The same mouth that dismissed you will whisper your name in regret, and the same people who once questioned your worth will one day wish they'd had the wisdom to hold on. Because this isn't about revenge, it's about truth. And the truth is, when someone mistreats a sacred soul, the universe doesn't delay. It delivers. And that delivery is always on time. So hold your head high. Chosen one, you weren't too much. You were the measure. You weren't the fallback. You were the favor. You weren't just the love. You were the lesson, the ladder, the light. And now that you've been removed, what's left behind is a life that feels colder, smaller, and slower. When sacred things are treated like junk, the universe doesn't just remove the blessing, it responds with precision. It doesn't erupt in rage or thunder. It does something far worse. It leaves the one who fumbled the gift alone. Not just alone in space, but alone in silence, alone in shadow, alone with themselves. And it's in that hush where no noise can distract and no mask can hide that they're finally confronted with the truth. That quiet, that absence, that aching void, it confirms everything they once denied. You weren't too emotional, too intense, or too much. The truth is, they were too small to hold what God sent. Because when you treat spiritual currency like pocket change, the universe freezes your account, and suddenly, you're spiritually broke. Let's not sugarcoat it. Call this what it is, a crime scene on the soul's level. This was not just a breakup. You weren't just a boyfriend, girlfriend, or date. You were walking breakthrough divine energy wrapped in human form. When you entered their life, things shifted. Argument de-escalated. Storms quieted. Confusion cleared. Growth began. You didn't have to ask for miracles. You were a miracle in motion. Your mere presence was a correction to their chaos. Have you ever noticed how people calm down just being near you? How your presence changes atmospheres? That's not coincidence. That's calling. But they laughed. Laughed at the idea of losing you, mocked your sensitivity, downplayed your intuition. They held something sacred in their hands and acted like it was common. They thought they had time, thought you'd stay forever, thought you'd keep forgiving. And now they stand in the rubble of their own arrogance, trying to pretend the collapse is just a rough patch. But behind the staged smiles and social captions, They're in spiritual free fall. Everything looks fine. Lights are on. Clothes are clean. Vacations still happen. But inside, there's nothing. The spirit is drained. Joy feels mechanical. Laughter is forced. That hollow space where your energy used to live is now an echo chamber of guilt, regret, and unspoken shame. And you can feel it, can't you? The off-balance frequency, the glitch in their energy, the disconnection they thought you wouldn't notice. But you did. You always did. Because chosen ones don't just love deeply, they discern deeply. And now, every time they try to replace you, they're confronted with the truth. You were never ordinary. That new person they're with, they can't go deep. The shiny new life, it's all surface. It glitters, but it's hollow. A life that once felt full now tastes like plastic. Enjoy. When disconnected from spiritual alignment, becomes stale. They thought walking away from you was freedom, but what do you call freedom when it turns into a prison of your own making? That's not liberation, that's spiritual jail. You were the balance, the regulator, the sacred frequency that kept everything flowing. Once they lost that energy, their entire world tilted off-center. Nights feel longer, food testadule, music hits wrong, peace escapes them like vapor. And it's not because you cursed them, it's not your revenge, it's spiritual law. Galatians 6-7 declares, "Do not be deceived, God is not mocked. A man reaps what he sows." They sowed carelessness, and now they're reaping emptiness. They tried to replace rare with regular. Now, mediocrity is choking them. And the universe, it doesn't just whisper, it amplifies. Every time they try to distract themselves, the volume of regret turns up louder. That feeling in their chest, that's not anxiety. That's awareness. That's consequence. Their account closed the moment they mishandled you. And now they finally understand. Treat a divine bond like pocket change. And life hands you pennies in return, nothing more. Let's dismantle the fairy tale they told themselves. That vanishing act, that abrupt silence, the unread messages and cold distance, it wasn't maturity. It wasn't peace. It was panic. It was frantic. Clumsy damage, controlling, attempt to erase the evidence of betrayal. They weren't brave enough to face. They didn't disappear because they were healed. They disappeared because they were guilty. Because deep down, they knew exactly what they did and exactly what they lost. They painted themselves as the victim, framed the narrative to look like they outgrew you, like they needed space. But truth doesn't bend for comfort. Your energy was too real. Your presence too confronting. And instead of evolving, they fled. They ghosted you. But in reality, they ghosted the version of themselves they didn't want to see in your mirror, the liar, the manipulator, the one who mishandled the sacred and tried to call it growth. But energy has a funny way of returning home. You can block a number, mute a story, vanish from a feed, but you cannot outrun the frequency you emit. That energy you broadcast is now looping back sharp, fast, unrelenting. The universe doesn't forget. Psalm 37-28 tells us, "For the Lord loves justice and will not forsake his faithful ones." You were faithful, and now justice is quietly unraveling behind the scenes. Their new life, it's cracking. That peace they bragged about, performative. Those nights they swore felt so free, haunted. Favorite songs now sting. Old haunts feel eerie. Conversations derail when your name slips into the air. And the stronger self they claim to become, It's a mask. Behind it is a soul wrestling with echoes, what-ifs, guilt, your voice looping in memories, your laugh lingering in quiet moments. And now, their energy is unraveling at the seams. This isn't punishment. This is revelation. Isaiah 5:21. Woe to those who call evil good and good evil. That's what they did. They mislabeled your love, mocked your kindness, trashed your grace, and now they face a silence that won't leave. Because when the sacred is disrespected, the fallout isn't loud, it's eternal. Graveyards stay haunted, and this one echoes with the weight of everything they mishandled. You weren't just love, you were realignment, restoration. You were the blessing, and they mishandled the entire blueprint. Now, they sit with what they created, a hollow life built on half-truths and missed opportunities. Each time they try to paint a new beginning, the past bleeds through the canvas. You may not see the full fallout, but you feel it, because your spirit knows when justice is being served. You feel lighter, stronger, more whole. And that's how you know heaven is answering. Romans 12:19 says, "Do not take revenge. Leave room for God's wrath." That wrath isn't fire and brimstone, it's alignment. It's watching you rise while they wrestle with the weight of what they lost. Spiritual conviction bellows louder than pride. It doesn't wait for receipts or formal goodbyes. It surges the moment someone violates a soul wrapped in divine protection. Their quiet wasn't strength, it was panic. That eerie hush wasn't healing, it was guilt. Now that guilt does the work they refused. It creeps into memories, haunts missed opportunities, and chills every breath each time your name echoes. Can you sense that inner tremor when someone mentions you? That's the drumbeat of what they lost, a constant reminder that they could have had forever, but chose fear instead. They believed truth could be buried, but truth rises just like you did. While you're glowing in alignment and moving forward, they remain locked in the same cage of silence, guarded by the very guilt they tried to bury. They didn't simply lithe, they handed your name on a silver platter to those who wanted you broken, smiled at your face, then watched you bleed in private. You loved with open hands, dreaming of building something lasting. While they whispered with people who fed on envy, those weren't harmless jokes. They were secret meetings wrapped in malice. And your ex? He nodded in agreement. Do you ever wonder why the heart pretends to keep pace with love while dancing in darkness? You believed love meant safety, but for them, love was for rent available until the rent was due. They allowed dark forces to twist their words, their body, their choices, not because they couldn't see your light, but because your light was too brilliant for their insecure darkness. You walked in elevation, they shrank in your shadow. Instead of rising, they sat with bitter gossips who loathed how naturally you shined. They didn't protect you, they traded meals at tables where your name was venom. That wasn't immaturity, that was betrayal of the soul. Somebody broke into your sacred center and spread your vulnerabilities to spiritual darkness. Even after you found the breach, you still prayed for restoration, still hoped your love could heal the room, but the poison had already seeped into their foundation. They tried silence, ghosting, triangulation, mind games, anything to bully you into questioning your worth. When nothing broke you, they vanished, banking on your self-destruction. What they never calculated was this: you were never unguarded. You walked with divine guardrails. Every whisper was recorded. Every stab was catalogued. Every table that roasted your name now eats from the plate they poisoned. They thought your silence was surrender. But in that quiet, The universe moved, and now confusion clings to their soul. The chaos they sowed is flourishing in their own life. Peace has fled the premises. When you ally with darkness to dim the light, the darkness brands you. The worst blow isn't losing you. They lost their final shot at divine alignment. You were the reset button they refused to press, the mirror they dared not bear. Now all that's left is smoke and memories of a love that won't return. Because this wasn't emotional dishonesty, it was a spiritual hit job. And now the invoice has come due in every silent room they enter. When you hand sacred things to the bitter, the sacred stays luminous, but the betrayer burns. Your energy was their greatest gift, and they scorned the hand that steadied them. Foolish people don't just lose favor, they offend the source. Then they wonder why storms hit after you leave. They believed your patience was weakness, your intuition delusion, your glow accidental, but they didn't realize you were their shield standing between them and destruction. They summoned unknowingly. You weren't a mere partner, you were walking favor. They mocked your prayers, brushed off your warnings, rolled their eyes at spiritual insight. Yet those same insights held back the tempests. Your presence wasn't random, it was divine architecture. You were placed to balance energy, to fill voids in their discipline, to protect them from unseen attacks. And yet, did they ever say thank you? No. Now that silence they loved so much, it's deafening. Everything is heavier, pressure in the chest, spinning thoughts, doors that close before they open. Sleep no longer heals. Friends grow distant. Blessings stall. It's not just bad vibes, it's the absence of your spiritual covering. You carried the weight for both of you while they partied. You prayed while they spiraled. You disciplined while chaos knocked. You anchored. They assumed peace was their doing, but it was yours. The winds didn't come from their hustle. They came on your alignment. But when you keep disrespecting the source steps away. Now they're facing hard decisions. Time feels like quicksand. Blessings gone, the spiritual current unplugged. This truth stings. The blessing didn't leave because it exhausted itself. It left because they disrespected it. The universe doesn't keep shielding those who demean sacred presence. Now they'll search for a replacement, but they'll never reproduce your frequency. It wasn't learned, it was placed, and now they chase phantoms, reaching for something they only appreciated once it disappeared. They laughed while you cried, never realizing you weren't falling, you were giving birth. A snake mocks an eagle's silence, forgetting that silence is how the eagle strikes. They saw your unraveling and called it fragile. They believed their departure broke you, but they didn't know your pain was sacred labor. It was messy, yes, but it was holy. Every tear cleansed a boundary. Every sleepless night purged old limits. Rage, sadness, numbness, they were signposts of divine reconstruction. Pain didn't poison you, purified you. Betrayal didn't break you, commissioned you. Have you ever wondered why great tragedies so often precede monumental breakthroughs? Think of Oprah, fired from her first reporting job, only to become the world's most influential talk show host. Or J.K. Rowling, rejected by 12 publishers before Harry Potter changed lives. Or Michael Jordan, cut from his high school basketball team, only to become a sports legend. Their crises weren't curses, they were the crucible. And yours is your season of birth. Remember, inertia is broken only by disruption. Hebrews 12:11 reminds us, no discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful. Later on, however, It produces a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who have been trained by it. Your labor pains are training you in righteousness. Your pain is cultivating peace. Your birthing is your becoming. Even biblical heroes endured similar spiritual betrayals. Joseph was betrayed by brothers. Sold into slavery, yet he became second in command in Egypt. Genesis 37:41. David faced mockery from his own family before he became Israel's greatest king. 1 Samuel 17. Esther risked everything in a foreign court to save her people. They were all chosen. They were all wounded. They all walked through fires to stand in favor. Now it's your turn. So as you step into light you never knew you carried. Know this: their absence doesn't signify loss, it marks elevation. Their guilt doesn't shame, it shouts your righteousness. Their silence doesn't break, it confirms your alignment. They're stuck in the wreckage they caused, but you're the phoenix rising from the ashes, brighter, stronger, divinely sealed. Let this be the moment you see betrayal, not as ruin but as appointment, not as rejection but as renaming, and not as the end but as the entry into the favor you were destined to live in. The world may have looked at your pain and assumed you broke, but spiritual labor births destiny, and now, by divine design, it births you. Spiritual conviction roars far louder than fleeting pride. It doesn't wait for proof, nor does it require formal closure. The moment someone's actions betray a soul secured by divine order, this conviction springs into motion. Can you feel it when someone's silence isn't peace, but panic? That hush isn't healing, it's guilt pounding in the dark, in those late-night stillnesses. Guilt begins the work they avoided, flooding memories, haunting missed chances, and freezing every breath whenever your name drifts by. Their world shifts beneath them because your presence lingers like a steady heartbeat in the background, reminding them of forever, a sanctuary they rejected in favor of fear. They believed truth could be buried, but truth always rises just like you did. So while you bask in alignment and step boldly forward, they remain trapped in that same cage built from silence, locked by guilt, and guarded by the very energy they once tried to escape. They didn't just tell small lies, they handed your name to your enemies like a heavy gift wrapped in malice. They smiled at you, then watched you bleed in their quiet, while you loved with open hands, dreaming of building a foundation. They entertained whispers from those who wanted to see you crumble. Those weren't harmless jokes. They were strategic gatherings painted with envy, and your ex sat there, nodding in agreement. Does it make you wonder why the very people meant to protect us can be the same ones who lean in to hurt us? You believed love was a fortress. Instead, theirs was for rent, occupied by whoever paid the loudest. They allowed darker forces to invade, twisting their words, body, and decisions, not because your light was hidden, but because it was too brilliant for their fragile darkness. You walked in elevation, and they shrank in your shadow, rather than rising. They teamed up with bitter gossips who resented your natural shine. They didn't protect you. They sat at tables where your name was spat out as venom. This wasn't immaturity, it was a betrayal of the soul. Someone broke into your softest place and leaked your sacred truth to spiritual darkness. Even after you uncovered the breach, you continued to pray, believing love could still bring healing. But the poison had already seeped deep within. They tried everything: the silence, the ghosting, the triangulation, the mind games, anything to convince you that you were anything less than radiant. When none of it shattered you, they vanished, expecting your spirit to disintegrate without them. But what they didn't account for is that you were never unprotected. God placed divine guardrails around you. Every whisper was logged. Every stab counted. Every table that spat your name now eats from the plate they poisoned, never realizing how their words became serving spoons, dipped in their own remorse. Their assumption that your silence meant surrender was their undoing. But that quiet was the universe's green light to rebalance what was broken. And now, confusion sticks to them like glue. The chaos they planted has grown into a personal thicket. Peace doesn't live there anymore. When you ride the chaos to dim the light, the darkness marks you. Instead, their greatest loss wasn't Ute, was their last chance at divine alignment. You were the reset button they refused to press, the mirror they couldn't tolerate. Now, all they have is smoke and the memory of a love that will never return. This wasn't just dishonesty, it was a spiritual hit job. And now the invoice is coming due in every room they enter. When you hand the sacred to the bitter, the sacred stays luminous, but the betrayer burns in the aftermath. Your energy was the one true blessing they scoffed at. Fools not only misplace favor, they antagonize the source of it. Then they sit in confusion and marvel. Why are storms hitting since you left? They mistook your patience for weakness, your intuition for delusion, your glow for mere coincidence. But they failed to realize you were the shield placed between them and the catastrophe they unwittingly invited. You weren't just a partner, you were living favor. Breathing, blessing. You shielded them with your prayers, grounded them with your presence, reordered chaos wherever you stepped. They mocked you for being spiritual, but it was that very supernatural oversight that held off the storms. Your presence wasn't by chance, it was divine strategy. You were assigned to balance the energy, to bridge gaps in their discipline, to guard them against threats they couldn't even detect. And yet, did they ever say thank you? No. Now, that silence they so eagerly embraced bounces back as deafening. Everything feels heavy, pressure on the chest, spinning thoughts, doors shutting before they open. Sleep stops being restorative, friendships warp, blessings heat delays. This isn't just negative vibes, it's the absence of your spiritual covering. You carried the weight for both of you, praying while they partied, anchoring while they unraveled, holding space when chaos knocked. They believed peace was their achievement, but the winds they credited themselves for blowing came on your alignment. But continued disrespect toward the source and divine presence goes away. And now they stand at crossroads. Time feels like quicksand, and blessings have dried up because the very current that empowered them has been unplugged. This is the painful truth. The blessing didn't leave because it had ended, it left because it was dishonored. The universe doesn't maintain concealment for those who continually degrade something sacred. Soon, they'll go searching for replacements, but they will never find your frequency. It wasn't learned or mimicked, was placed by heaven. Now they chase shadows, vainly grasping for something they only came to appreciate after it disappeared. They laughed while you wept, not knowing that you weren't collapsing, you were in labor. A snake mocks an eagle's silence, forgetting that greatness attacks by staying still until the right moment. They saw your unraveling and called it weakness. They believed their departure would destroy you. But what they missed was that your ache was sacred labor. It was messy but holy. Each tear dissolved old limitations. Each sleepless night detoxed your spirit. Rage, sorrow, numbness, they weren't signs of destruction, they were signs of divine reconstruction. Pain didn't poison you, it purified you. Betrayal didn't break you, it commissioned you. Have you ever noticed how most destinies are born in prisons, pits, or nightmares? Think of Harriet Tubman escaping slavery, yet returning again and again to lead hundreds to freedom. Consider Nelson Mandela, who endured 27 years in prison before becoming South Africa's first black president. Their darkest hours became the birthplace of their destiny. As Psalm 30:5 says, "Weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning." That's not just a saying, it's your story in motion. And now, God is rebuilding you for heights beyond what they were ever meant to ascend. Their celebration of your perceived downfall didn't last. The moment you chose yourself, the scales began to tip. They didn't ruin your spirit, they revealed it. They exposed the parts that needed healing, but they also helped you raise your standards. Today, you're refined. Your tears became seeds in the garden of your rebirth. Let them keep replaying the laughter that once stung, blind to the fact that they filmed your transformation. What they watched wasn't a breakdown, it was a rise. The cocoon is gone. In its place stands a force they cannot stand beside. You weren't defeated, you were delivered. They chased illusions and chucked away the blueprint. A fool only recognizes gold's value after trading it for glitter that flakes and fades. They convinced themselves you were replaceable. But you were never just a partner, you were the prototype. Walk away from the original, and all they're left with are fake copies. Soulless imitations. They chased reflections that mimicked your shine, but couldn't hold your frequency. At first the new one was thrilling, fresh facades, new attention, but the transition faded quickly. All that remains is a hollow echo. It's more than you. They miss its depth, its grounding, its clarity. That new person demanded nothing, no growth, no accountability. Just ego strokes and light surface vibes. You were labeled difficult because you challenged comfort zones, because you invited depth, asked for authenticity, required emotional work. It frightened them, so they ran to someone who required nothing. Now, what once felt like peace feels like a trap, deep in their heart. They know this to be true. They sense the emptiness. They feel seen in body, but invisible in spirit. They traded truth for fantasy, and ended up with neither. Meanwhile, you outgrew the labyrinth. You no longer shrink to fit old rooms. You don't explain your worth, you simply walk. Ready to be embraced, not Proverbs 28:26 warns. Those who trust in themselves are fools, but those who walk in wisdom are kept safe. Your wisdom now keeps you safe, and for them, they stand in the wreckage of what they broke, unable to rebuild with the same broken hands that caused the damage. So, chosen one, know your value. Your sacrifice to break survival mode and people-pleasing has unlocked your purpose. They misread your grief as weakness, but you've proven chosen souls aren't destroyed by fire. We are forged by it. Harriet Tubman lost more than you have, then carried others across the river to freedom. Nelson Mandela wept, locked behind prison walls, then stepped out into history. Destiny doesn't avoid darkness, it's born in it. While they toasted your fall, God was reconstructing you for heights far beyond their reach. Their momentary glee was the chisel shaping your throne. Their disbelief at your rise, that's the sound of destiny being proven. The moment they chose outward noise over inward peace, they declined the invitation God had extended to them. And now, while they wander in the echo of what's missing, you walk in the fullness of what's emerging. Because you were never about being liked, you were about being sent. Their loss isn't your lack, it's theirs. Their regret won't reverse what God has declared. Their guilt won't unmake your calling. They tossed away a prototype, You're the original. They sought glitter. They got soot. You lost survival mode. They lost what they never understood, a soul that stretched into purpose. Beloved, now that the dust has settled and your silence speaks volumes, they finally see it, the glow that doesn't come from makeup or filters, but from divine alignment. They see you, steady, but no longer accessible. They hear the echo of a line that used to be open, now permanently cut not out of vengeance. But because the spiritual contract has expired, that divine connection was never meant to be abused. And once they mishandled it, heaven revoked the blessing. What they have now are imitations, copies that resemble you in appearance but lack the essence, the weight, the favor. They can chase as many reflections as they want, but none will ever carry the thunder of your presence, because chosen ones don't just love, they cover, elevate, and restore. And once you walk away, what's left is not rejection, it's divine retraction. They didn't just lose access to you, they lost the presence of God that walked with you. Now, as you rise, you do so not in pettiness, but in prophecy. You don't climb with rage. You ascend with revelation. While they entertain illusions, you walk in substance. And every step you take in peace is a step further into promise. Let them race toward noise. You were called to stillness. Let them flirt with fantasy. You were called to build legacy. Because you were the original, you were the blueprint. And no counterfeit can carry the legacy God handcrafted inside you. It's not about ego, it's about alignment. It's not about being unreachable, it's about being preserved. So if these words touched a hidden place in your spirit, if something in your soul stood up and remembered who you are, don't keep this message to yourself. Share it with someone who's still doubting their worth, still healing from betrayal, still waiting for confirmation that they were never the problem. Let this be your reminder. You are not difficult. You are divine. You are not too much. You are chosen. And that glow they're finally seeing, it's the shine of someone who has survived fire and come out refined. To our beloved community of God's chosen ones, thank you for walking this journey with us. Your strength, your faith, your hunger for truth, these things inspire every word we create. If this message has blessed you, and you feel led to support the mission, you can click the super thanks button to sow a seed into this work. But know this, whether you give or not, you are deeply valued. Your presence here is already a gift. Your support, financial or spiritual, is sacred to us, and we never take it for granted. Until we meet again in the next message. May God bless you with peace that surpasses understanding, with joy that overflows, and with the kind of love that makes you forget you were ever betrayed. Walk tall, speak softly, carry heaven within you. You are the storm they didn't see coming. You are the miracle they mishandled. And now, you're unstoppable. We love you deeply. We're praying for you, always. Take care, and we'll see you soon.